People keep calling me strong, but they don't know what I did to earn that title. What I lost. What I buried. I built an entire life on top of a single lie, and now that lie is starting to crack. Someone's asking questions they shouldn't. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. My ex, Charlie, he was the kind of guy who made people orbit around him without even trying. And when he died, I thought everything about him would finally stop controlling my life. I couldn't have been more wrong. The day of the will reading, the lawyer's office was packed, his family, old friends, and a lineup of ex-girlfriends who all looked like they'd rather claw each other's eyes out than sit together. I slid into a seat in the very back, trying to be invisible. But Charlie's mom had other plans. Her glare found me instantly, sharp enough to cut glass. She blamed me for everything, the breakup, the accident, his death. The lawyer cleared his throat, holding a piece of paper like it might bite him. Per Mr. Charlie Williams' instructions, he began, the $670,000 estate will be distributed, based on your performance in this Jeopardy game. The room rippled with gasps and scoffs. His brother barked out a laugh. This is insane. She shouldn't even be here, he shouted, jabbing a finger at me. Not after what she did. I froze. But the lawyer didn't flinch. Miss A. Mears was specifically invited. He powered on a screen. Categories appeared in bold letters: Charlie's habits, medical history, final months, personal secrets, and the most chilling that night. First question for 100, he said. Charlie's morning routine included this specific drink. His sister buzzed in immediately. Protein shake. Incorrect. I stared at the buzzer like it might explode if I touched it. Then click. Green tea with honey, I said softly. No caffeine after his diagnosis. His mom's voice sliced through the air. What diagnosis? The lawyer ignored her. More questions came, rapid fire. And I knew them all. His Thursday therapy sessions. The meditation app he used to fall asleep. Why he sold his motorcycle. Every answer I got right twisted their faces tighter with suspicion. She stalked him, his brother hissed under his breath. Then came medical history for daily double. What medication was Charlie taking? Sertraline. 100 milligrams daily, I answered. His mom snapped. If you knew about his medication, then you knew what would happen if he mixed it with anything. You knew and you let him. The lawyer raised his voice. Comments after the game, please. But the room was already vibrating with accusation. Every correct answer I gave felt less like winning and more like walking into a trap. When we got to that night for 500, the room fell dead silent. What beverage did Charlie consume at Amanda's apartment? I buzzed. Chamomile tea with honey. His sister practically screamed. You gave him that knowing it would make him drowsy with his meds. I could feel every pair of eyes drilling into me. Then, Final Jeopardy. Category, the truth. Please make your wagers, the lawyer said. I wagered everything. What else was there to lose? They already saw me as guilty. I thought about all the little things, Googling medication interactions, begging him to talk to his doctor, those endless texts the night it happened. What did Charlie take after leaving Amanda's apartment? They scribbled their guesses: alcohol, sleeping pills, tea. I wrote mine down with shaking hands. The timer buzzed. His brother's answer: alcohol. His sister: sleeping meds. His mom: whatever Amanda poisoned him with. The lawyer turned to me. Amanda? I flipped my board. Diphenhydramine. A massive dose. The room detonated. She admits it. Call 911. But then a calm, steady voice cut through the chaos. Let her finish, said Dr. Hyatt, Charlie's therapist, rising from the back. I swallowed. Benadryl, I said. It's fatal when mixed with sertraline, which he took after leaving my place. After the tea. After he called Dr. Hyatt to discuss his plan. Protected from what? His mother snapped. From blame, Dr. Hyatt said quietly. He knew the tea would misdirect suspicion. It was harmless. But he wanted Amanda to look guilty. His sister went pale. The lawyer announced. Final question worth the entire estate: what did Charlie leave in his safety deposit box? I froze. This wasn't on the board. Everyone turned toward me. Dr. Hyatt pulled out a small silver key. Amanda, the lawyer said. You have one chance. And suddenly I was back in that last night, Charlie insisting on tea he usually hated. Adding honey himself. The way he hugged me like he was memorizing me. My answer, I whispered. His journal. Correct. The lawyer pulled out a worn notebook. The room went dead quiet, except for Charlie's mother screaming that I was a murderer. But Rachel Williams, the executor, raised her hand. She explained the journal was in a sealed box at First National Bank, and that its contents would determine how his fortune was divided. His mother ranted, his brother lunged at me, and his cousins barely held him back. Rachel threatened to call security, then said the police were already waiting to speak to several people. Including me. A detective named Elise Napier took me to a small gray conference room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. She was calm, almost detached, like this was just another Tuesday for her. She explained I wasn't under arrest, but they needed to talk about Charlie's death, especially after everything revealed during the will reading. She asked me to walk her through the night. So I did. How he came over at 8. How I made him tea when he said he needed something calming. How he left tired but fine around 10. How I knew about his meds because we used to talk about everything. She raised a brow. Why know so many personal details about someone you're not with anymore? I told her the truth, we'd stayed in touch. I still cared. Knowing his therapy schedule and what tea he liked didn't make me a murderer. She closed her notepad. Said someone would follow up. Rachel escorted me out through the back hallway, away from the family's burning stairs. In the garage, I sat in my car, hands shaking too hard to even start the engine. The buzzing fluorescent lights made everything look sickly green. My phone started vibrating, texts from strangers. Someone had already posted about the will reading online. Murderer. We know what you did. Hope you get what's coming to you. I turned off my phone and tried to breathe, but my chest felt like it was closing in. There was only one person I trusted, Allison from work. I called her, sobbing before I could even speak. She told me to come to her place. No hesitation. No judgment. When I finally got to her apartment, the weight of everything hit me at once. I cried harder than I had since the night Charlie died. Allison didn't tell me it would be okay. She just sat beside me and let me break. When I finished spilling everything, the game, the accusations, the journal, the detective, the threats, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "We're getting you a lawyer." The next morning, we started calling firms. The first was booked out. The second wanted more money than I could dream of. The third, a man named Desmond Fraser, offered a free consultation that afternoon. His office downtown was clean, quiet, and smelled faintly of old books and polish. He shook my hand, calm and steady, the kind of person you want when your world's on fire. I told him everything. Every brutal detail. And he listened without interrupting, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone. Desmond leaned back in his chair, the pen he'd been using clicking softly as he set it down. His voice was calm but serious when he said, "The tea isn't the problem here." It was harmless. "What is a problem is you talking to anyone without me from this point forward. No family. No cops. No reporters. Nobody." My stomach tightened as he laid it all out, police, family, even casual acquaintances. He wasn't being dramatic, this was strategy. "Amanda," he added, locking eyes with me, "people hear what they want to hear. And right now they want you to be guilty." When he asked about my finances, I admitted I only had around $3,000 saved. He didn't flinch. "We'll figure it out," he said. "But the priority is protecting you. No more loose conversations. Everything goes through me." That evening, he called again to prep me for what was coming. His tone was steady, methodical. "The investigation's going to focus on 3 things," he said. 1. Did you know about the interaction between sertraline and diphenhydramine? 2. Did you have any reason to hurt him? 3. Did you give him the pills or tell him to take them? I told him I didn't even know what diphenhydramine was until the will reading. I thought it was some kind of prescription medication. Desmond didn't look surprised. He just said, "Then we build the timeline. Every call. Every message. Every moment." For the next 3 days, I lived in his office. We mapped everything out, my history with Charlie, when we met, why we split, how we ended up talking again. I wrote down every text I could remember, every phone call, every detail from the night he came over for tea. Desmond drilled it into me, facts only. No guessing what Charlie felt, no filling in blanks. But while we were quietly building our defense, Charlie's family was setting the internet on fire. His mom posted old photos with captions about "a killer walking free." His brother ranted about justice systems failing grieving families. Friends, cousins, complete strangers chimed in with comments about what should happen to poisoners. One night, I made the mistake of reading the comments. I didn't sleep after that. By Wednesday, I knew I couldn't hide this from work anymore. The posts were spreading fast. I booked a meeting with my boss and HR. I told them everything about Charlie's death, the will, the investigation. My boss tried to be kind, but I could see the worry in her eyes. HR said they'd support me but wanted regular updates. Then Desmond called with news. Dr. Hyatt had reached out. The therapist wanted to help but couldn't legally share anything without a court order. Desmond said we'd likely need to subpoena his records. It felt awful, dragging Charlie's private sessions into this mess, but the alternative was letting everyone keep believing I was a murderer. Thursday came fast. I met Desmond at the police station, heart hammering like a drum. Detective Napier was professional, cool, methodical. She went through everything in order, our relationship, why we broke up, why we stayed in touch that last night. I stuck to the facts exactly as Desmond coached me. Then she slid a folder across the table. My internet search history. My own handwriting on the screen. Weeks-old searches, sertraline interactions, safe meds for anxiety, antidepressant side effects. My stomach dropped. It looked bad. Desmond jumped in before I could panic. Those were harm reduction searches. She was helping him, not planning anything. Napier didn't say much, just made notes. When we left, Desmond told me, "It looks bad, but it's not evidence of intent." And the real decider here? The journal. His own words. The following week, Rachel Williams filed a motion to access Charlie's journal under court seal. The probate judge scheduled a hearing. By then, my life at work felt like walking through glass. People stared. Some avoided me. At lunch, Allison stuck by me like a shield. When a woman at the next table made a snide comment about getting away with murder, Allison snapped back, "Maybe wait for facts before playing detective." Still, I burned with shame. Then my phone rang. I answered without checking the caller ID. Charlie's mother's voice hit me like a slap. "Murderer. You killed my son. I'll make sure you pay for it. You'll rot in prison." I hung up, shaking. She called again. And again. I finally went to HR, hands trembling as I told them everything. They changed my extension and told me to document every contact. It felt surreal, like my real life had been replaced by someone else's nightmare. 3 days later, Desmond called, and for the first time in weeks there was good news. Charlie had bought the diphenhydramine himself. His pharmacy records showed the purchase, 3 days before his death, on his own credit card. A big bottle too. Not something I'd given him, not something I'd even known about. This is huge, Desmond said. It proves he had the medication before that night. It shifts the entire narrative. I felt air fill my lungs properly for the first time in forever. Desmond warned me to stay cautious. The family won't just accept this, but at least now there was actual evidence. The probate hearing was tense. I sat in the back as Rachel and Charlie's family attorney argued. His family wanted the will thrown out, claiming Charlie wasn't of sound mind when he wrote it. Rachel pushed back hard, arguing that the journal had to be reviewed before anyone could challenge the will. The judge, an older woman with a weary face, listened, then shut it down with a simple statement. She'd read the journal privately. Whatever was relevant to the estate and the investigation would be shared. That was final. I slipped out a side door after the hearing, avoiding the family's glares. 2 days later, Rachel called me at work. Her voice was steady, almost soft. Amanda, the judge finished reading the journal. There are entries. Multiple entries. Charlie wrote about his plan. About the tea. About how he wanted it to look suspicious but be harmless. For a moment I couldn't breathe. She explained the judge had already contacted Detective Napier. The entries cleared me. They showed Charlie's intent, his choice. But Rachel also warned me. His family's not going to let this go. They'll fight. They'll say the journal's fake or coerced. Be ready. I thanked her and hung up, sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. Relief and grief twisted together inside me like a knot I couldn't untangle. I wanted to read his words. I was terrified too. Detective Napier's voice on the phone wasn't sharp or accusatory anymore. It was careful. Controlled. She asked Desmond to bring me in for another conversation, and when we met at the station the next day, everything about her demeanor had changed. She started by acknowledging that the journal entries had shifted the entire direction of the investigation. We're still gathering evidence, she said, her tone steady, but the context is different now. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting ever since Rachel told me what was in that notebook. Did Charlie ever talk to you about suicide? I told her the truth. Yes, we talked about his depression before. He had bad days and dark thoughts, but he never told me he was actively planning to die. If he had, I would have done something. Anything. I would have tried to get him help. She took notes, asked about his therapy with Dr. Hyatt. I explained that I knew he went, but he never told me the details of what they discussed. It was private. She asked if I'd noticed anything different about him in the weeks before he died. I said he seemed tired, stressed, but that wasn't new. 30 minutes later, the interview ended with a short, "We'll be in touch." When Desmond and I walked out, he gave a small nod. That was good, he said quietly. Her tone isn't that of someone building a case against you anymore. The judge released the journal summary to everyone shortly after. Desmond handed me a copy in his office, and I read it sitting in the same chair where I'd heard every terrifying update for weeks. Charlie's handwriting was exactly as I remembered it, clean, deliberate, each letter controlled. The entries started 2 months before he died. He wrote about feeling trapped under the weight of his family's expectations, how they didn't really know him. How he wanted to protect me while proving to them how little they understood about his life. One entry explained his plan for the tea, perfectly harmless but perfectly suspicious. He knew they'd blame me. He counted on it. Another entry laid it out in chilling detail, calling Dr. Hyatt after leaving my place to create a timestamp proving he was alive and coherent, giving the police and his family a timeline that would eventually clear me. But not before I spent weeks as the obvious suspect. He knew exactly what would happen to me. I read those lines again and again, my throat burning. He said he loved me. Said he wanted to protect me. But in his version of protection, I was collateral damage in his final act. Charlie used me. He set me up to be accused. He engineered suspicion like it was part of some grand, poetic gesture. Desmond let me sit there as my chest rose and fell too fast, too tight. When he finally asked if I was okay, I told him no. But I would be. Eventually. He said my reaction was normal. Anyone would be furious. And I was. I hated him for what he did. And I still missed him. Grief is cruel like that. Desmond filed a motion to subpoena Dr. Hyatt's records, the call, the session notes. Dr. Hyatt's attorney responded almost immediately, they wouldn't fight it. The court approved the subpoena and gave 2 weeks for compliance. 10 days later, the session notes arrived. I sat in Desmond's office again as he flipped through them carefully. They confirmed everything. Charlie called Dr. Hyatt at 10:47 p.m., 20 minutes after leaving my apartment. The note said he sounded calm. Resolved. They talked about his plans, about protecting people from blame. Dr. Hyatt tried to talk him in for an emergency session, but Charlie refused. Reading those notes made it real in a way the journal hadn't. This wasn't just Charlie's voice anymore. This was clinical, documented, undeniable. But the relief didn't last. 2 days later, Desmond got a letter from Charlie's family attorney. They were going to file a wrongful death lawsuit against me. They claimed that even if I hadn't given him the pills, I had created the circumstances that led to his death. That I should have recognized his mental state. That inviting him over was reckless. That I had a duty to save him and I failed. Desmond sighed as he read it over the phone. This is probably an intimidation move, he said, but we have to take it seriously. When I asked what it would cost, his answer made my stomach twist. Tens of thousands. Even if I won, I could lose everything. Work wasn't safe anymore either. The rumors had spread like wildfire. People went silent when I walked by. Someone turned their computer screen away as I passed. At lunch, Allison found me alone at my desk and told me half the office thought I'd poisoned Charlie. The other half thought I'd let it happen. Later that day, my boss and HR called me in. They said they were temporarily moving me to another floor to reduce tension. I heard what they didn't say out loud. People don't want to sit near you. When I packed up my things, no one spoke. Allison helped me carry the box to the empty overflow floor. Her anger was sharp and quiet. "This isn't fair," she muttered. And then, because life kept finding new ways to twist the knife, Allison got written up 3 days later for defending me in the break room. Then Desmond called. His voice sounded different this time. Lighter. "We got the toxicology report," he said. It confirmed everything. Charlie had lethal levels of diphenhydramine mixed with sertraline. No alcohol. Only trace amounts of chamomile tea, completely irrelevant pharmacologically. The tea I'd given him didn't make him drowsy. It didn't interact with his meds. It didn't kill him. Charlie did that himself after he left. The toxicology report cleared me more completely than any argument ever could. But Desmond didn't sugarcoat it. The criminal case might be over soon, but the family could still go after me in civil court. He sat across from me in his office, hands folded on the desk, voice steady. Civil suits don't work like criminal cases. They don't have to prove intent. Just negligence. And even winning can cost you everything. The weight of it all settled over me like a lead blanket. I called a therapist that night. I'd been unraveling quietly for weeks, panic attacks at work, sleepless nights, flashes of that night on repeat in my head. Her office was small and warm. She listened without judgment as I told her everything. When I said I felt guilty for not stopping Charlie, she let the silence stretch before she spoke. "Charlie made a choice," she said gently. "But involving you, using you without your consent? That was a harm he inflicted. You can love him and be furious at him at the same time. Those feelings don't cancel each other out." I didn't realize I was crying until she handed me a tissue. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the villain in someone else's story. I just felt human. Flawed. Hurt. Surviving. Desmond called me early that morning, and I could tell from the weight in his voice that something big had come in. "The bank records came back," he said. Charlie had gone to his safety deposit box the day before he died. He'd signed in a loan during business hours and spent nearly 40 minutes in the vault. The security footage showed him slipping multiple items into the box, including what looked unmistakably like a notebook. The timestamp put him there less than 24 hours before everything happened. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. He planned it. Carefully. Thoroughly. He built a timeline like a puzzle, piece by piece. The idea that he'd been calmly, deliberately arranging all of this while I'd been living my normal life made my skin crawl. Rachel Williams notified everyone that the probate judge had scheduled a hearing to determine whether Charlie's bizarre Jeopardy game clause in the will was legally valid. His family was pushing to have the whole thing thrown out, claiming he was mentally unstable when he drafted it. Their lawyer argued that the game itself proved he wasn't of sound mind. The hearing was set for 6 weeks out. 6 more weeks of legal arguments, public attacks, and limbo. Rachel believed the judge would likely uphold the will, pointing out that Charlie had been in therapy and no professional had ever declared him incompetent. But knowing something should happen and living through the storm until it does are two very different things. Then another piece of the puzzle dropped like a stone into my stomach. Desmond's investigator found that Charlie had purchased the same brand of honey I kept in my kitchen, 2 days before his death. He didn't use my honey. He brought his own. That detail broke something in me. I could picture it so vividly, Charlie standing in my kitchen that night, twisting the lid open on the jar he'd bought specifically for this, spooning it into the tea like nothing was wrong. Not random. Not careless. Deliberate. And then came the dashcam footage. A rideshare driver had been parked on my street, waiting for a pickup. His dashcam caught Charlie's car at 10:32 p.m., 15 minutes after he left my apartment. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but you could see him sitting behind the wheel, not moving, just holding something small in his hands. Desmond and Detective Napier agreed. It fit perfectly with the timeline of him taking the pills. He didn't drive off and make a sudden decision later. He sat right there, right outside my apartment, and made his final choice. Desmond's assistant called later saying Charlie's sister wanted to talk to me. We agreed to a short, supervised call from Desmond's office. When her voice came through the speaker, it was tired, fragile. So different from the shouting match at the will reading. She told me she'd been looking through the evidence, really looking at it this time. The toxicology, the bank records, the journal. Some of it didn't match what their family attorney was telling them. Then she said something that made my heart twist. "My brother's been feeding our mom selective information. Only what makes you look guilty. He doesn't want to believe this was Charlie's choice." I told her everything. How much I'd loved Charlie. How angry I was at him now for using me, for dragging me through this. How he'd brought the honey himself. How the tea had been harmless. How the pills had always been in his hands. She was quiet for a long moment. And then she said she didn't think I killed him. She just didn't know how to reconcile the brother she'd loved with someone capable of orchestrating something so cruel. I told her I didn't either. When the call ended, I just sat there in silence, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, maybe the first fragile hint of being believed. 2 days later, Detective Napier called Desmond again. We put her on speaker. Her tone was almost warm this time. "The prosecutor's office reviewed everything," she said. "The journal, the pharmacy records, the dashcam footage. There's no evidence you provided him with the medication or knew what he planned. Criminal charges are unlikely. The case will probably close as suicide in a few weeks." I thanked her, but the relief didn't feel clean. It sat heavy in my chest. The case might be closing, but the damage had already been done. The next afternoon, Desmond got a call from Dr. Hyatt's attorney. The state licensing board had opened an ethics inquiry into whether Dr. Hyatt should have broken confidentiality to warn someone about Charlie's plans. They wanted to know if I'd provide a statement. Desmond explained it wasn't required, but it could help him keep his license. I didn't even hesitate. Dr. Hyatt had stood up for me when no one else would. He tried to explain the truth at that will reading while everyone else was ready to string me up. He hadn't known exactly what Charlie planned. No one had. I told Desmond to draft the statement. That night, I read over the legal language carefully, explaining that Charlie hadn't made any explicit threats that would have triggered a duty to warn. I signed it and sent it back. Meanwhile, things at work were unraveling fast. Someone forwarded Charlie's family's social media posts to the entire company email list. Photos. Accusations. My name. When my boss and HR called me in, the shame hit like a physical blow. They showed me the email thread, dozens of replies, some supportive, others dripping with hostility. HR sent out a company-wide message about respect and privacy, but it only made things worse. Everyone was talking about me now. My boss gently suggested I take temporary leave. I could read between the lines. Staying wasn't going to be sustainable. I called Desmond and he told me I could push back legally, but he also reminded me of the cost of fighting every single battle. At lunch, Allison was furious, ready to burn the office down on my behalf. But I was just exhausted. So I agreed to a 2-month leave of absence at partial pay. It was the only way to breathe without 100 eyes on me every day. That Friday, I packed the last of my things in a box, walked past cubicles full of whispers and left. Allison hugged me at the elevator and promised to keep me updated and shut down rumors whenever she could. But I knew she couldn't stop everything. Charlie had set something in motion that no one could fully control. Even as the law inched closer to clearing me, the fallout was everywhere. My job, my reputation, my life. He planned it that way. The following Monday, Desmond handed me a thick, crisp envelope, no expression on his face, which was never a good sign. "It's from Charlie's family attorney," he said. Inside was a formal letter, a settlement offer for the wrongful death claim. They would drop the lawsuit entirely if I gave up any inheritance from Charlie's estate and signed a statement acknowledging that I should have recognized his mental state and done more to prevent his death. Desmond watched me read it twice without saying a word. Finally, he leaned back and said, "This is actually progress. If they're proposing settlement, it means they know their case is weak." I asked what would happen if I refused. His voice was steady. "Then they'll probably file the lawsuit anyway. Months of depositions. Fees. Headlines. Stress. But legally, this letter is a sign they're hedging their bets." The statement they wanted was worded carefully, no legal admission of guilt, but enough to let them wave it around like a victory. I told Desmond I needed time to think. We had 2 weeks. 2 weeks of weighing pride against exhaustion. Allison's reaction was immediate. "Tell them to go to hell." My therapist's reaction was gentler. "Do what leaves you with the least damage." 3 weeks after the will reading, I walked into a small courtroom for the probate hearing. Charlie's mother sat in the front row, stiff and stone-faced, with his brother beside her like a wall. His sister sat alone in the back, and when our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Not forgiveness. Not accusation. Just something. The judge reviewed the will, the Jeopardy game clause, and Charlie's journal entries. Rachel Williams argued that the game was bizarre but legally sound. Charlie's instructions were explicit. The family's attorney insisted he'd been mentally unstable, that the game proved his lack of capacity. The judge listened, asked a few pointed questions about the journal's authenticity and whether Charlie had been under duress. Then came the ruling. Unusual does not mean invalid. The will stands. Charlie had been legally competent when he wrote it. The Jeopardy mechanism was upheld. The judge also noted Charlie's instructions about charitable donations and protecting certain people, hinting that distribution would follow both the will and the intent expressed in his journal. Then the judge said, "There's one more matter." A sealed letter addressed to the court had been found in the journal. He decided to read it aloud. The courtroom fell utterly silent. You could hear fabric shifting and someone's breath catch in the second row. The judge read in a neutral, steady tone. Charlie's words felt like they were cutting straight into me. He wrote that he had planned his death deliberately. That he designed the Jeopardy game to force his family to confront how little they'd known him. That he'd brewed the tea knowing it would look suspicious but was harmless. That he'd bought the pills himself. That he'd called Dr. Hyatt to create a timeline that cleared me. And then, I know they'll blame Amanda first. I'm sorry for that. But it's the only way the truth will come out. The letter ended with donation instructions for mental health organizations and a line about me. She doesn't owe me anything. She may accept or refuse her inheritance freely. There will be no judgment either way. When the judge finished reading, no one moved. Then Charlie's mother made a small, broken sound. And everything she'd been holding inside came spilling out in jagged, uncontrollable sobs. His brother put an arm around her. His sister stared at the floor. I just sat there, feeling the weight of his final words pressing against my chest. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt gutted. He had used me like a piece of his final act. A shield. A symbol. A prop. The judge called a recess. 2 weeks later, Charlie's family attorney formally withdrew the wrongful death suit. They said they were doing it as a moral decision, insisting I shouldn't inherit anything from the estate, not because I was guilty but because it was wrong to profit. When Desmond read their letter aloud, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Charlie had orchestrated all of this like a twisted chess match, and now his family wanted to make one last move to punish me for being his chosen scapegoat. "I don't want the inheritance," I said. "Let's donate it." Desmond looked at me carefully, then nodded. We spent the next hour choosing mental health organizations, 3 of them, the same ones Charlie had mentioned in his journal. Desmond planned to make the donation part of the official estate settlement to close every door they might try to reopen. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized immediately. Detective Napier. Her voice sounded lighter this time. The prosecutor's office issued its decision this morning. No criminal charges. The evidence clearly shows Charlie acted alone. The case will be closed as suicide. No charges. No trial. No prison. I thanked her quietly, but after we hung up, I just sat there on my couch, the silence pressing against me. The official record would say I wasn't guilty. But official records don't erase whispered accusations. Or the looks I'd endured. Or the way Charlie's family had stared at me like a monster. Charlie had wanted the truth to come out eventually. It did. But it came at a cost I never agreed to pay. The next morning, I woke up to an email I didn't recognize at first. From Sarah Williams. Charlie's sister. For a second, my hand hovered over the trackpad, my stomach dropping like it had the night of the will reading. I clicked it open anyway. The email was short, barely 5 sentences. She said she'd read everything. The journal entries. The pharmacy records. The call logs. She believed the evidence. She believed me. Then she wrote that their mother would never accept what the evidence showed, that grief needed a target. And that, even though Sarah personally didn't think I hurt Charlie, she would stand by her family. I read the message 3 times. Part of me felt a quiet kind of relief that at least one person in his family saw the truth. Another part of me felt a hard, sharp anger, because she wouldn't say it out loud to them. She wouldn't stand up. She would just let me keep being their villain. I typed out a thank you. Deleted it. Typed out a careful, I understand family loyalty. Deleted that too. In the end, I just closed the email without responding. There wasn't anything I could say that would change what she'd already decided. A week later, Desmond called to tell me that Rachel had filed the final estate distribution plan with the probate court. Charlie's mother, brother, and sister would each receive around $70,000. $200,000 would be split evenly between the 3 mental health organizations I'd chosen. My share, $150,000, would only be released if I signed the donation agreements, redirecting it all to those same organizations. The estate would also cover legal fees and court costs before anything else. When Desmond asked if I wanted to review the documents, I told him no. I trusted him to handle it. It wasn't about the money for me anymore. It never had been. The final probate hearing came 10 days later. The courtroom was smaller this time, quieter. I sat next to Desmond at one table. Rachel stood at the front, walking the judge through the estate plan. Charlie's mother wasn't there, too overwhelmed, according to her lawyer. His brother sat in the back, glaring at me like the weight of his anger could set me on fire. His sister sat beside him but kept her eyes down the entire time. The judge went through every detail of the plan, asking about the charitable donations, the will's language, the journal entries. Rachel cited specific passages showing this was what Charlie wanted, his words, his intentions. After a long stretch of page flipping and silence, the judge finally said, "The estate plan is reasonable, consistent with the will, and in line with the decedent's documented intentions." Approved. Just like that, the legal storm that had torn through my life for months started to settle. 3 weeks later, Desmond forwarded me a letter from Dr. Hyatt's attorney. The state licensing board had concluded its ethics inquiry. Result, a formal caution. No suspension. No license restrictions. There was a short note from Dr. Hyatt himself. He thanked me for the statement I'd given the board and said he regretted everything, Charlie's death and the fallout that rippled through so many lives. I closed the email slowly, feeling the quiet sadness of it all. This entire situation had burned through so many people who had nothing to do with Charlie's final decision. When my leave of absence ended, I walked back into the office like I was stepping into a place I no longer entirely belonged to. HR had apparently done sensitivity training while I was gone. There was a memo in my inbox about workplace respect and assumptions around investigations. Most coworkers were awkward, not cruel. They asked careful questions. Gave polite smiles. Changed the subject fast. Allison met me at my desk with coffee and a grin that actually felt real. She told me everything I'd missed, office drama, projects, rumors. She admitted she'd spent weeks shutting people down when they tried to speculate. She'd heard apologies, apparently. Some people said they'd been wrong. Others just went quiet. Our friendship had been strong before. Now it felt unshakable. 6 weeks after the estate was finalized, the Mental Health Fund launched in Charlie's name. The 3 organizations collaborated to create a joint initiative focused on medication safety and suicide prevention. They invited me to the launch. Asked if I wanted to speak. I said no. I didn't want to be the public face of Charlie's death. But I agreed to sit on a planning committee to help decide how the fund would be used. For the first time in a long time, something good felt like it might come out of all this. Summer crept in and I realized I hadn't visited Charlie's grave since the funeral. I drove to the cemetery one quiet Saturday morning. The air was already warm, the sky pale blue. His marker was simple, flat against the grass. There were flowers, probably from his mother, drooping and brittle in the heat. I stood there for a long time trying to figure out what to say. Everything I'd imagined on the way over, eloquent cinematic speeches, dissolved into nothing the second I opened my mouth. I was angry. So angry at him for dragging me into his final performance. I was also still sad, for what he went through, for what he couldn't bring himself to say. I'd been accused by the people who loved him. And I'd loved him too. That contradiction sat heavy in my chest. I left a small bouquet next to the wilting flowers. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just acknowledgement. When I walked back to my car, the air felt a little lighter. Not good. Not healed. But lighter. And for the first time in months, that was enough. Therapy was what finally shifted the ground beneath me. For so long I'd carried everything, Charlie's death, the accusations, the weight of his family's grief, as if it were mine to fix. My therapist helped me see what I couldn't control. I couldn't control Charlie choosing to die. I couldn't control the way he built a perfect storm around me to look guilty. I couldn't control his family's need to point their pain at someone. But I could control my energy, how much of my life I'd keep sacrificing to defend myself to people who would never listen. Whether I'd let his final act define the rest of my life. 3 months later, Sarah reached out again. Her text was simple. Would you meet me for coffee? No pressure. Just to talk. I stared at it for an entire day, turning it over in my mind, unsure if this was genuine or some trap orchestrated by her family. Desmond told me it was my choice, but if I went, to do it in public. We met on a Saturday morning at a quiet downtown coffee shop. The first few minutes were painfully awkward. We both stirred our drinks like we were waiting for someone else to break the silence. Finally, she spoke. She said she'd been turning everything over in her head, the evidence, the investigation, the journal that had shown her how little her family actually knew about Charlie. She wanted to understand who he really was. I told her about the good moments in our relationship. The messy fights. The way he could be gentle one day and unreachable the next. She told me about their childhood, the crushing expectations from their mother, their father leaving when Charlie was 12, the emotional vacuum that followed. 2 hours passed. No tears. Just honesty and exhaustion. Before we left, she said she couldn't be my friend. Her loyalty to her mother was immovable, but she wanted me to know she believed the evidence. That she didn't think I hurt him. We said goodbye in the parking lot, and I knew it was probably the last time we'd speak. But it mattered. After that, the storm began to fade. The social media posts calling me a murderer got buried under new scandals. Trolls moved on to fresher targets. Someone would occasionally comment on old posts, but the constant harassment died down. I made my accounts private. Stopped Googling my name every morning like I was waiting for a verdict. My therapist reminded me, some people would always believe I was guilty. That was beyond my control. My energy belonged to the people who actually knew me, people like Allison, who had stood by me every step of the way, shutting down gossip without hesitation. Gradually, life took shape again. 6 weeks after I returned from leave, my boss called me into her office. They had a new technical project, deep data analysis, the kind of work that demanded complete focus. I jumped at it. For months, I buried myself in spreadsheets, algorithms, databases, things I could actually solve. By the end of the quarter, my performance reviews were the strongest I'd had in years. My boss even mentioned a senior role that might open the following year. That possibility felt like proof that my career wasn't permanently ruined. That I was more than the accusations. 9 months after the estate was settled, the Mental Health Fund held its first public event. I sat in the back row of the community center, anonymous among 50 strangers, as speakers talked about suicide prevention and medication safety. It wasn't about Charlie. It was about helping people like him before they reached that point. I spotted Dr. Hyatt sitting quietly across the room. Our eyes met and we exchanged a small, wordless nod. We didn't need to talk. We both carried our own scars from what happened. The event raised several $1,000s. It felt quietly like something good had been salvaged from something terrible. And then one morning, almost exactly a year after Charlie died, something small but enormous happened. I got ready for work, drove halfway through my commute, and realized I hadn't thought about the investigation at all. Not once. For months, those memories had been the first thing in my head every single day. The detective's questions, Charlie's mother's screams, the sick dread of being accused. But that morning, my brain had moved on to normal thoughts, work deadlines, traffic lights, lunch plans. I told my therapist and she smiled gently. That's healing, she said. It's not forgetting. It's learning to live without the trauma running your entire life. And she was right. The memories didn't vanish. But they stopped owning me. I started noticing more moments like that, days where the noise faded into the background, where my life felt like mine again. About 14 months after everything, I met someone new. It happened at a friend's party, one of those low-key nights where no one's trying too hard. We started talking about completely normal things, work, hobbies, stupid little everyday stories. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the conversation flowed easily. No shadow of accusations. No courtroom. No grief hovering over me. We went on a few dates. I didn't rush. I couldn't. But on our fourth one, sitting in a quiet corner of a cafe, I told him everything. The investigation. The suspicion. Charlie. He didn't flinch. He didn't stare at me like I was a tragic headline or handle me like I might break. He listened. Asked thoughtful questions. Then just treated me like me. That small, quiet moment was huge. It was proof that I could be honest about what happened without it swallowing my identity. About 18 months after the estate closed, Desmond forwarded me an email from Charlie's family attorney. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't warm either. Just formal. The family wanted quarterly reports on the mental health fund. They didn't want contact with me, they just wanted to see how the money was being used. I agreed. The fund would send them the reports directly, no personal conversations required. It was a boundary that made sense. It let them honor Charlie's legacy without reopening old wounds. I wondered if Sarah had pushed for it. It felt like something she'd do quietly, trying to bridge the gap between her mother's anger and the truth she'd accepted. 2 years after Charlie died, I drove down the street where it all happened. For almost 2 years I'd avoided that intersection completely, taking the long way, turning down different streets. That Saturday I didn't. My grip tightened on the wheel, my chest felt tight, but I didn't turn back. I didn't fall apart. I just kept driving. It wasn't some cinematic, tear-filled moment of closure. It was quiet. Simple. Real. A reminder that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just looks like moving forward, one street at a time. By then my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. The legal nightmare was behind me. The whispers had faded. I wasn't defined by being the woman they thought killed him. The mental health fund was helping people, dozens of them each year, with medication safety education and suicide prevention. Allison and I were closer than ever. Nothing builds trust like surviving a storm together. Work was good. A promotion was on the horizon. The person I was dating had become something more. We were talking about moving in together, building something that had nothing to do with Charlie. And yet, I still thought about him sometimes. Usually late at night. The anger had dulled, but it never disappeared. What was left was something quieter. A sad kind of acceptance. He'd made choices I couldn't control. He'd set everything in motion and left me to live in the fallout. Maybe he didn't think it through. Maybe he thought the truth would come out fast and clean. But that wasn't how real life works. I'll never get neat answers to those questions. And that's okay. Because I built a life out of the wreckage anyway. I learned to stop chasing forgiveness from people who would never give it. I learned that healing isn't erasing what happened. It's absorbing it into a story that's bigger than the pain. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.